Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Patrick drove with his hands steady on the wheel, navigating the already familiar streets of the neighborhood where he lived. The headlights of the cars passing by him were like small flashes cutting through the darkness around him, but what dominated his thoughts were memories that kept coming back, as if every corner pulled him into the past. He vividly remembered the day he met Melissa, 7 years ago. At that time, his life revolved around work. He had always been a reserved man, someone who preferred silence over big conversations and crowds. He never had the patience for parties or going out to find company. During his youth, he had a few brief romantic experiences, nothing that truly marked him, just fleeting encounters that ended as quickly as they began. He was aware that his shyness and focus on work had always pushed away any possibility of experiencing a true romance. Time passed, and Patrick became more and more immersed in the business world. His construction company prospered in an impressive way, and he saw life change before his eyes. Houses, cars, trips, everything was within his reach. Still, even surrounded by achievements, there was something inside him that remained empty. Friends commented that he needed to relax, go out more, meet new people. But he always found excuses to avoid gatherings or social commitments. Until one day, at a business event hosted by a partner construction company, everything changed. From a distance, he saw her, with that easy smile and a light way of talking to everyone around her. Melissa seemed to belong to another world, a world he always believed he would never reach. She was beautiful, spontaneous, and had a gaze that mixed sweetness and confidence. During that event, without even realizing how, the two ended up talking. She spoke about travels, books, movies, and Patrick found himself smiling in a way he hadn't in a long time. The meeting started repeating, always simple, without rush. A coffee here, a dinner there, and suddenly, he was living something he never imagined possible. Melissa seemed genuinely interested in him, not for what he had, but for who he was. With her, Patrick felt comfortable, as if he could finally relax and show his insecurities, his fears, without fear of judgment. And so, in just 6 months, he decided he wanted to spend the rest of his life with her. The marriage proposal happened discreetly, like everything between them. No big surprises, no movie-like scenes. Just him, her, and a simple question, which was answered with tears in her eyes and an emotional smile. Still, despite all the feelings involved, Patrick remained firm in a decision he had made long before meeting Melissa. He was never naive in the business world. He knew that love, no matter how true it seemed, could change over time. Therefore, he insisted that the marriage be conducted under the regime of total separation of assets. Melissa hesitated when he brought up the subject. She didn't argue, but the expression on her face at that moment stayed etched in his memory. Patrick noticed her discomfort, the way she looked away, the change in her breathing, but he remained unshaken. He explained that it was necessary, not because of distrust, but as a precaution. He said that in life, unforeseen events happen, and he needed to protect what he had built with so much effort. Melissa accepted, perhaps out of love, perhaps out of pride, but she accepted. With the contract signed, they formalized their union and began a new chapter together. Deep down, Patrick believed that this choice was a way to ensure that the love between them was genuine, free from hidden interests. And at that moment, he thought he had made the right decision. As he headed toward his house, Patrick got lost in memories that began to mix with reality. Thoughts came and went, as if each memory triggered another, and so he found himself surrounded by scenes he preferred to forget. The recent trip was still fresh in his mind. He had spent 7 days away, handling an important negotiation that could expand his company. When he returned, everything seemed normal on the surface, but it only took one small detail to awaken something inside him. When he turned on the living room TV, the channel that appeared on the screen was golf. For years, he had heard Melissa say she hated that sport, that she never understood how anyone could waste time watching such monotonous matches. That struck him as strange, like a silent warning. In that instant, Patrick remained silent. He looked around the room, observed every corner, analyzed the way she behaved, and everything seemed fine. Even so, that simple detail made him sink into a growing unease with every passing minute. During dinner that night, he casually mentioned it, in a calm voice. He asked if she had received any visitors, almost nonchalantly, as if just filling the silence with a question. Melissa responded naturally, saying no one had been to the house during his absence. She smiled while speaking, as if the question was almost amusing. Patrick observed her closely, paying attention to every movement, every word, and even without concrete evidence, something inside him continued pointing to a hidden truth. That night, as she slept beside him, he stayed awake, feeling that something was out of place. From that moment on, he decided he wouldn't leave things to chance. The next morning, right after breakfast, Patrick left determined. He sought out a private detective known for his discretion and efficiency. He explained every detail, without beating around the bush, and requested that the investigation be carried out with the utmost care, so Melissa wouldn't suspect a thing. The professional listened attentively, took notes, and made it clear that quick results might emerge, depending on the situation. Patrick, upon leaving, already had a plan in mind. A week later, he announced to Melissa that he would take a new 3-day trip, claiming urgent commitments with investors. She reacted as usual, with that understanding demeanor, wishing him luck and asking him to take care of himself. This time, however, he didn't go anywhere. He packed a bag just to keep up appearances but headed straight to one of his apartments, located near the office. The place was simple, used only for rest between appointments, but on this occasion, it became perfect for what he needed, a safe distance without raising suspicion. On the first night, everything remained calm. He tried to keep his mind occupied with documents and reports, but his phone was always within reach. Early the next morning, the detective sent a short message, asking him to take the call urgently. As soon as Patrick answered, he heard the words that froze his blood. The evidence was in hand. The detective got straight to the point, without detours, saying that if he wanted to see everything with his own eyes, now was the time. The betrayal wasn't just a vague suspicion anymore. It was a fact. Patrick hung up the phone with trembling hands, but his face maintained its usual cold and controlled expression. He put the phone in his pocket, grabbed the keys, and left with a single objective. As he got into the car, his heart was heavy, but his thoughts were clear. It was time to see what had been hidden for so long, and nothing would stop him from doing it. Patrick parked the car 2 houses before his. The street was quiet, making the silence even heavier. He sat in the driver's seat for a few seconds, staring at the closed gate, as if he could see everything happening inside. He took a deep breath and stepped out of the car. With each step, his mind replayed everything he had heard from the detective, every detail, every described image. The betrayal, until then merely a suspicion, was now just a few meters away, about to be confronted head-on. Patrick crossed the garden slowly, opened the house door carefully, and entered without making a sound. He headed to the bedroom, driven by a mix of indignation and serenity that made him feel strange even to himself. He already knew what he would find there. There was no more room for doubt. He stopped in front of the closed door and, for a brief moment, let the weight of it all wash over him. Without hesitation, he turned the doorknob and opened the door. The scene was grotesque in its simplicity. Melissa was there, lying on the bed they had shared for years, asleep next to a man he recognized immediately. It was her ex-boyfriend, someone who had once been just a distant memory, but now he was there, occupying a space that should never have been allowed. The two slept peacefully, as if they were at peace, oblivious to everything approaching. Patrick stood still, observing them for a few seconds. There was no visible anger on his face, just a strange sense of contempt that filled him completely. He pulled out his phone, opened the camera, and captured every detail with precision. The photos were clear, indisputable, definitive proof that spoke for itself. After putting the phone away, he clapped his hands loudly, the sound echoing through the room and making the floor vibrate. The impact was immediate. Melissa woke up startled, her face pale and eyes wide, unable to process what was happening. Her lover, completely disoriented, jumped up at once, trying to grab the scattered clothes. He threw on his pants and ran out of the house, stumbling down the hallway as he fled that absolute embarrassment. Melissa stayed in the bedroom, trembling, her breathing uneven. Tears began streaming down her face before she could utter a word. She tried to explain, but her sentences came out disjointed, empty, full of excuses that barely made sense. She said she was confused, that it was a mistake, that it all happened unexpectedly. Patrick listened in silence, without interrupting, observing each word as if analyzing something irrelevant. When she realized he remained impassive, desperation took over, and she begged for forgiveness, swearing it would never happen again. He then spoke, in a calm but firm tone, telling her to get up, get dressed, and leave the house immediately. There was no room for appeals or prolonged conversations. He said that the next day, he would send someone to pick up her things, as there was nothing left tying her to that house. Melissa cried, pleaded, trying to reach any trace of compassion, but Patrick had already made up his mind. For him, the scene he had just witnessed had destroyed any remnants of feelings that might have remained. He watched as she hastily gathered some clothes, still sobbing, leaving the house carrying makeshift bags, her dignity dragged across the floor. As soon as she crossed the threshold, Patrick closed the door without saying another word, as if closing a chapter and deciding never to revisit it. On his face, there was no trace of fury or satisfaction. Only the cold expression of someone who had just freed themselves from a burden they had pretended didn't exist for a long time. The divorce proceeded quickly, with no room for defense or last-minute maneuvers. The evidence Patrick provided was devastating. Every photo, every detail of the detective's report, everything had been meticulously documented, with dates, times, and testimonies that made the betrayal unquestionable. The judge, upon reviewing the documents, maintained a strict posture. It didn't take long for the sentence to be handed down. Melissa lost everything irreversibly. Without the right to alimony and excluded from any share of the assets accumulated during their marriage, she left the courthouse defeated, her face pale and her gaze lost. The total separation of assets, agreed upon at the start of the marriage, had become a trap she herself had accepted, never imagining that years later it would lead to her downfall. However, what Melissa didn't know was that Patrick didn't intend to stop there. He knew that even though she was financially ruined, she still needed to learn a lesson she would never forget. During the divorce proceedings, the detective discovered that her ex-boyfriend, besides being involved in the affair, had used the office where he worked to mediate illegal businesses, taking advantage of confidential information obtained from clients. Patrick, well versed in the legal system, decided to act with precision. He hired a lawyer specialized in commercial litigation and initiated a lawsuit against Melissa's lover, using the RICO Act, the same American law used to combat fraud, money laundering, and corruption in companies. Patrick's lawyer was direct. With the evidence in hand, he showed that the lover had violated professional confidentiality by accessing private data during meetings with Melissa, since she had shared details of construction projects while they were having the affair. Moreover, it became clear that part of the money the lover flaunted came from illegal activities, including financial fraud in real estate contracts. Patrick filed the lawsuit based on commercial damages and moral harm, accusing the man of conspiracy to commit fraud and illicit enrichment. The complaint was quickly accepted by the federal court, and the case became a scandal among local entrepreneurs. During the trial, the ex-boyfriend tried to claim it was all personal revenge, but the evidence was overwhelming. Patrick presented messages, audio recordings, and bank statements proving the illegal activities. The sentence was harsh. The lover was ordered to pay millions in compensation for moral and commercial damages, in addition to losing his professional license to operate in the investment field. He left the courthouse humiliated, with his assets frozen and facing prison for fraud and tax evasion. Melissa, who had still been trying to stay in contact with him after the divorce, was coldly ignored. Desperate, she tried to reconcile, but he refused any approach, claiming she had ruined his life. With no alternatives, Melissa ended up sharing a room with a friend, while her ex-boyfriend faced criminal charges that would keep him away from society for many years. Patrick, on the other hand, continued his life in complete tranquility. The lawsuit not only protected his company from a potential scam but also brought him a multi-million-dollar financial compensation, further strengthening his image as an honest and relentless businessman. He reinvested the money he received into his own business, expanding operations to other states. Over time, Patrick realized that everything had unfolded so precisely that it seemed planned from the beginning. While Melissa faded into obscurity, he prospered more than he ever imagined. By that point, he harbored no resentment. The feeling that moved him was different, the certainty that certain betrayals, when exposed at the right moment, can not only liberate but also open doors to a new cycle of power and success. On a random night, while reviewing contracts on the porch of his home, Patrick reflected on everything that had happened. A faint smile appeared on his face, accompanied by a sense of absolute victory. For him, this story was never just about a failed marriage. It was about intelligence, coldness, and above all, knowing how to transform pain into a triumph few would have the courage to pursue. And there, sitting in peace, he was certain that some forms of liberation come disguised as tragedy, but in reality, they are simply the beginning of freedom. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.